So it basically came about, my work colleague was involved. So Ant got involved in the program before I did. And he then, it was new to all of us. We hadn't heard about it before. We weren't aware that there was anything like this going. And it was just interesting to see his involvement and engagement and his excitement in the process. And then sort of halfway through his program, he came and approached me and said, would I be interested in doing one, joining P4P, the following program? And I said, sure. And I, got the details, got put into my circle. And yeah, that was pretty much the introduction to it. I think what I enjoyed is that there's always people criticizing the education system. Everyone is an armchair critic when it comes to the government should be doing this and they should be doing that. And we all recognize the stress on the resources. We recognize the fact that there are many schools which are very under-resourced, and that's not a secret. But there's too many people that know this but do nothing about it. And I've always had an interest in education. I think it's the key to lifting up this country, and we need to get more involved. I think everybody can get involved across the spectrum. It's not just about giving money, but if you give time, and I think if you're also just there to listen, and maybe you can drop a pearl of wisdom here or there, that's one component. And then the other component was also, I think it's really good for business people and their empathy to realize what they can learn from the relationship. And there's a lot that they can learn from the relationship. The school that I was allocated and the principal I was allocated was already unique in the sense that not only was it in a fairly rough area. When I say rough, the Cape Flats we know is prone to gangsterism, it's prone to drugs. Now you want to throw in the element of a special needs school. And that's the school that I was allocated. So it's a special needs school, highly under-resourced, with kids who have a broad spectrum. This isn't the developed world where you have a special school just for people with autism and just for specific mental challenges. This is across the board. Basically, the education department says, oh well, that child isn't able to cope in a mainstream system, so we're just going to put them into the Blowflay Resource Center. And Cordelia, who is a very strong, very dynamic woman who has been newly appointed principal, she took this job on, clearly, selfless. And when I met her and I met the school, I thought, okay, well, one thing that the department's done right is they've matched someone who's actually able to get their hands dirty and try and understand and help these kids, because this school is not just a school for mentally challenged kids or special needs kids. This is the only safe haven. It's the only stability that they've got. And I think that was immediately a real eye-opener to understand and say, the parents of these kids are already from an impoverished area. They're already influenced by drugs and gangsterism. They already have no real means to help the school. They can't pay school fees. They can't even help out with transporting the kids to school. And here you have Cordelia who puts up her hand and says, well, what? Not only am I going to help bring the school up, but I'm going to help make sure that the kids come to a safe place and that they can be transported there and back. They can be fed. And all of these things which really seem over and above an initial kind of traditional teacher's calling. When Cordelia and I both met on the program, I think one thing that jumped out for both of us is that we found common ground really quickly on that we were both results driven. So whilst we recognized that P4P was also about engaging with each other and understanding each other around a good and healthy conversation, her and I, from the get-go, said, okay, cool, well, let's see what needs to be done. And that might have been a little bit off the agenda, but, in a sense, we did. We got things done, because Cordelia is very, very action-orientated, and I think that's why she's so suitable for where she is. One of the key things that she wanted to do was uplift the place, recognizing that it was a safe haven for kids. So she wanted to organize, building materials to help fix classrooms. She wanted to help get various gardening things sorted out, mechanics for her buses, and that kind of thing. So, between her and I, the best thing was to say, well, how can we help each other? How do we get leverage to to try and beautify the school and make it safe. So one of the first things that we did is we got one of our mosaic artists to come and we kind of rejigged the school logo, and we made a really beautiful large mosaic badge, or the school badge, and put it up just sort of inside the school foyer, so that when the kids come in, there's a nice sense of pride. There's something beautiful. It's just a nice symbol and gesture of the school as a start. I suppose one of the key things that I learned from her when it came to the challenge, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, the challenges that she faced, is whilst the department puts her in a position to make key decisions and to ensure that things are done properly, I felt kind of helpless at times because of the amount of reporting that these teachers and principals have to do. They're forever being pulled off to meetings. They are overly burdened when it comes to sending in reports, asking for budgets, and at the end of the day, the job is quite simple, but it seems to be overburdened by the administrative burden that gets placed on the teachers. And every time I'd pop in there for a meeting or just touch base to see how she was, I kind of got the sense that there was always and everything from the department was always urgent. You've got to submit this, you've got to submit that, and there was always just a ton of administrative work that had to be done. And whilst Cordelia is someone who's wired to jump through hoops and to make a plan, I kind of felt that sometimes this acted as a bit of an anchor to holding her back, which might have been a good thing as well, because Cordelia can also wheel and deal, man. She can wheel and deal and make a plan. She'll take a limited budget and optimize it and make it go really far. And she's had to be really clever that way. Thought Time to Think was a really good workshop. Look, I've come from a consulting background, but at the same time, I also recognize that you can never know enough about a certain topic or anything like that. So Time to Think was good in that it was almost a refresher for me, and that it gave just really good principles and guidelines in the sense of a lot of people have blind spots. You go into any conversation and we immediately make up our mind, our own belief system, the lens in which we see the world, gives us perceptions and assumptions. And I think Time to Think was a very good reminder that we need to always just, pause and find out more and inquire gently. I think too often we jump to conclusions. We're too aggressive in the workplace. We take action on what we think is right before we actually take the time to find out really what's going on, what the context of a discussion or a person's situation is. I have been fortunate in that prior to the program, I have done a lot of studies in leadership and between university and the military, and I've been in lots of leadership positions per se, but then I also recognize that management positions aren't leadership positions. I think what P4P has done is it's firstly been a really good refresher, but more importantly, I think it's allowed me to feel more authentic in the way that I can lead. It's one thing, reading up a lot about leadership and having that experience, but when you're really truly exposed to real situations, not case studies, real situations where people are acting out and being inspirational just on how they do things, I think that gives a kind of maturity to the leadership that I could portray. So I think, to answer your question, I thought I was an okay leader prior to the time, but now I do feel that there is a more empathetic dimension that's been added, especially in dealing with my workforce, who a lot come from this environment that we worked in and the schools from. And I think it gave me more context, more understanding, and more patience. More patience in terms of having empathy for people's situations, environments. And I think that's important in this country. There's a large segment of South Africans who work in business, who come from privileged backgrounds, and who have good educations, and they earn a good living. And in their minds, they understand how systems, processes, and business works. And that also makes them cynical to where we are in this country, and it's a privileged position. But it gives them the insight to understand where there are shortages in our society. This program allows us to bridge those two together. So it's one thing being able to and have an educated opinion, but it's what this does is it allows you to actually get involved with an area which really needs help. The education department, the uplifting of our kids, the unlocking of resources and intellectual capital to flow back. But more importantly, for those people in those privileged positions to really see and get in the shoes and have their eyes opened, I think might give a bit more humility to a lot of the people in our business world. And at the same time, the other thing that's really important is that the relationship for the principals who are involved in the program, they need to recognize how much value they add in our society. And I don't think that they do. I think my experience was at workshops and that kind of thing, that they often felt that they were on the back foot. Here they were in the presence of these successful business people. And that's a stereotype that really needs to get out of the way. We're all South Africans. We come from different backgrounds, and P4P is really a safe environment which facilitates how educated people, successful business people can gain humility and help, and these people can actually realize how important they are in our society and be recognized for it. Because my experience is that all of these people on the business side really had their eyes opened. They really kind of said, wow, we had no idea, or we didn't quite understand the full impact. And you're doing such a good job. And I think that type of encouragement is important. It levels the playing field between what's really needed in this country and the different and various diverse backgrounds that we come from. You know, I said at the beginning that we were both very results driven and that kind of thing. One small little thing that I was able to help her out on is we got what we call ICE bracelets, in case of emergency bracelets. I'm also involved in cycling and that kind of thing, and I've got access to these bands. And what we did, because it's a special needs school, sometimes the kids take themselves for a little bit of a walk. They leave the schoolyard and they just go wandering around the neighborhood or wherever, and they don't have the mental capacity to be able to find their way home. And sometimes these kids just rock up wherever. So what Cordelia and I did is we said, look, we've got to maybe devise a way in which we can safeguard this. We're exposing young kids into a potentially dangerous environment. How can we help stop this? How can we help curb it? So we thought a simple solution would be to get these ICE bracelets. And basically what we did, we had a special engraving done, which was the name of the school, the phone number, and it was basically like a little boomerang tag. And if anybody went wondering, someone could find it. It's bright red with a little, engraved metal on. And we actually had one student that did go missing, and because of the bracelet being on them, someone found the kid, phoned the school, was able to pick them up and bring them home safely and untouched. And it's a small thing, but who knows what could have happened to that kid, and they've had bad experiences in the past. So that was a nice thing to have. Simple solution, keeps the kids safe and allows